The night smelled like roses, champagne and lies. It was the annual Carver Foundation Gala, black ties, pearls, and people pretending to care about charity while secretly counting donations like poker chips. My daughter, Melissa, stood center stage, glass raised, voice confident, camera lights catching every perfect curl of her hair. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling wide enough to show every expensive dental veneer. The crowd cheered. My husband, Derek, squeezed her shoulder, proud. And while they toasted to new beginnings, I was under anesthesia, chest cracked open in an operating room 2 miles away, praying I'd live long enough to see another sunrise. The doctors said my heart surgery was routine. My daughter insisted I'd be fine. Even planned the gala for the same night, to keep things normal. I didn't argue. I'd always let her run the show. Melissa was that kind of daughter, the type who made sure the spotlight found her, even if it meant I stood in the dark. I'd spent my life building the Carver Foundation, scholarships, food drives, community programs. It was my pride, my way of giving back after losing my husband years earlier. But somewhere along the line, Melissa decided helping people was bad branding. She wanted glitz, sponsorships, influencer tie-ins. I said no. She smiled, then did it anyway. When the anesthesia hit that night, I remember thinking, maybe this will change something. Maybe when I wake up, she'll remember I'm her mother, not a PR obstacle. But when I opened my eyes 2 days later, the first thing I saw wasn't flowers or family. It was a nurse holding a clipboard and a tax envelope. "Miss Carver, you'll need to sign this before you're discharged," she said gently. I could barely lift my hand, but I signed. My throat burned, my body felt like concrete. When she left, I opened the envelope. Property notice. My house was now listed under Melissa Hayes and Derek Hayes. I thought it was a clerical error, a mix-up, but deep down, I already knew better. Lying in that hospital bed, I scrolled through my phone with shaking fingers. Every joint account closed, every access code denied. Even the foundation website, the one I'd personally designed, redirected to a new domain, the Hayes Family Initiative. My name? Erased. I tried calling. No answer. Not from Melissa, not from Derek, not from anyone. The next morning, still groggy from medication, I opened social media. And there it was, a video from the gala. Melissa in a glittering silver dress, Derek beside her, smiling for the press. The caption read, "To family, to growth, to letting go." Letting go? They laughed, clinked glasses, and talked about fresh starts. No one mentioned me. Not a single word. I watched it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from the anesthesia. I wasn't. You know what's funny? Betrayal never arrives screaming. It's polite. It smiles. It tells the crowd you're moving on. And when you finally wake up, you realize you've been cut open in more ways than one. That night, I asked the nurse to turn off the lights. She probably thought I needed rest, but I wasn't tired. I was calculating. Every word, every smile, every fake "we're so proud of you, Mom" text that led to this exact moment. My daughter had toasted my absence like it was a business opportunity. My body ached, but my brain was on fire. I remembered her asking for my digital signatures for emergencies. Derek offering to streamline my banking to help while I recover. All of it lined up now like dominoes. When people talk about family betrayal, they always imagine shouting matches, slammed doors, lawsuits. But this was paper cuts, quiet ones, signed at midnight under legal letterhead. I leaned back in that hospital bed, the monitor beeping softly beside me. My chest hurt, not from the surgery, but from realizing my child, my only child, had looked at everything I'd built and thought, mine now. The next day, when the nurse came to check my vitals, I asked her for a mirror. She looked confused, but brought one. My reflection stared back, pale, exhausted, tubes taped to my skin, but still here, still breathing. And that, I realized, was going to be their biggest mistake. They had raised their glasses thinking I'd never wake up. I smiled, faint but real, the kind of smile you give before the first move in a very quiet war. Some people say revenge is ugly, maybe, but in my experience, it's just focused. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own daughter toasted your new beginning while you were fighting for your life? I read every one. And if you like real stories where karma comes dressed in pearls and fake smiles, make sure to subscribe. This one gets deeper. The nurse came back with new paperwork. Her eyes flicked to the monitors. "You're strong," she said softly. Strong wasn't the word. Awake was. And awake was all I needed. The sunlight cut through the blinds, thin and sharp, landing across my chest like a reminder. I was still alive. And if there's one thing my daughter didn't plan for, it was that. The smell of disinfectant still lingered in my hair when I got home. The house looked the same. White walls, framed photos, perfect furniture. But everything felt rearranged, like someone had been inside touching things that weren't theirs. My chest ached every time I breathed. I sat down slowly, letting the pain remind me I was still here. The voicemail light blinked on the phone. For a second, my heart jumped. Maybe it was her. Maybe guilt had finally found my daughter. But when I pressed play, it was just the hospital reminding me to pick up medication. Nothing from Melissa. Nothing from Derek. I picked up the envelope from the counter again. Their names printed cleanly under property owner. My name nowhere. My lawyer had warned me years ago to never mix accounts, never share passwords. I'd ignored him. You don't think you need protection from your own child. By evening, I opened my laptop and went to the Foundation's website. My hands trembled on the keyboard. The logo had changed from deep navy, my husband's favourite colour, to soft gold, Melissa's colour. The tagline underneath now read, "The Hayes Legacy, Building the Future Together." I stared at it for a long time. My foundation, my name, my work, all gone. A live video popped up on the homepage. Melissa's voice filled the room. "We've all faced challenges," she said. Her tone smooth and practiced, the kind of voice you use when you're selling sincerity. But through hardship, we found purpose. Tonight, we celebrate new beginnings. I froze. There she was, standing in my backyard. Under fairy lights, I'd strung myself for last year's charity event. Derek beside her, nodding like a proud CEO. The crowd clapped as she raised her glass again. "To growth," she said, pausing for effect, "and to honouring those who helped shape us, even if they couldn't stay." Couldn't stay. That line hit harder than any scalpel ever could. I closed the laptop so fast the sound echoed. My pulse thudded in my ears. She'd said it like a eulogy, like I was already gone. I sat there in silence, staring at my reflection in the dark window, trying to make sense of what kind of daughter throws a party for your absence. The phone rang. I didn't recognise the number, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Carver?" A calm voice, male, professional. "This is Ethan Ward. I handle financial compliance for the Carver Foundation. Well, the Hayes Foundation now." I said nothing. "There's been a restructuring," he continued carefully. "New ownership filings, new accounts. It seems everything was transferred during your hospitalisation. I just wanted to confirm your approval." I almost laughed. "My approval? Yes, ma'am. The paperwork included your digital signature, dated the night of your surgery." My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. "I was under anaesthesia." Silence on the line, then a slow, uncomfortable exhale. "I see. That would be a problem." I hung up before he could apologise. Outside, Charleston glowed like nothing was wrong. The azaleas were in bloom. The air smelled of salt and magnolia. And somewhere down the street, people were laughing. The world didn't stop just because mine had. I poured a glass of water, but my hand shook so badly it spilled. I wasn't angry yet. Not the kind of anger that screams. It was quieter, sharper, the kind that waits. When my husband died, Melissa was 17. I remember her at the funeral, silent, unreadable. I thought she was grieving. Now I wonder if she was studying me, learning how to hide emotion behind performance. Later that night, I tried calling her again. It rang twice before she answered. "Hi, Mom," she said sweetly, like everything was fine. "Are you home now? You sound tired." "I saw the video," I said. Pause. "What video?" "The one where you toasted my disappearance." She sighed. "Mom, that's not what it was. You're being dramatic." "Dramatic? It was symbolic. We needed closure. The family needed closure." "I am the family," I said quietly. "You're twisting things again. You don't understand how complicated it's been. That we did what was best for everyone. For everyone," I repeated. "Including yourselves? The selves?" The silence stretched thin. "You should rest," she finally said. "We'll talk later." She hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, the dial tone buzzing like a mosquito that wouldn't die. Then I opened the Foundation website again. My name was gone, replaced by hers and Derek's. The contact email, the leadership page, even the mission statement rewritten in her words. Every trace of me scrubbed away. I scrolled until I saw the new board photo. Melissa, smiling like the world had finally recognised her brilliance. Derek behind her, arm around her waist, both of them looking exactly like the kind of people who talk about philanthropy between yacht trips. My chest tightened. I didn't cry. Crying would have made them important. Instead, I clicked the tab closed and opened another folder, one I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were the original incorporation files, tax records, digital contracts. My fingerprints were on every document. They'd stolen everything. But they'd also left something behind. Evidence. I made copies. All of it. Saved them to a new drive, labelled it quietly. Restoration. Then I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. I thought of my grandmother's words, the ones she used when people disappointed her. When someone shows you what love means to them, believe it. Melissa had shown me. Loud and clear. I looked down at my scar, fresh and pink, running down the centre of my chest. It ached with every breath. But beneath that ache, a different pulse had started. Steady, determined. For the first time since waking up, I felt something close to peace. Not because I'd forgiven her, but because I'd seen her clearly. The clock ticked past midnight. The house was silent. I could almost hear the ocean from the back porch. I turned off the lights and stood there for a moment, letting the darkness settle around me. If my daughter wanted a clean slate, she was about to learn what happens when you erase the wrong person. The next morning, the air in my kitchen felt too still. I hadn't slept. The coffee machine sputtered weakly, as if even it was tired of pretending things were normal. I sat at the table, staring at the scar peeking out from the neckline of my robe. It looked like a zipper. The kind you pull shut when something's been opened that should have stayed closed. The doorbell rang just as the coffee finished brewing. I flinched at the sound. Through the glass, I saw Naomi, the nurse from the hospital, the only person who'd treated me like a human being in weeks. She was holding a small manila folder and a cautious smile. "I know it's unusual for me to drop by," she said, stepping inside when I waved her in, "but something about your paperwork bothered me." I gestured for her to sit. "You mean the tax envelope?" She shook her head and opened the folder. Inside were photocopies, hospital forms, consent waivers, billing signatures. "This one," she said, tapping the page, "was signed at 3:14 a.m. the night of your surgery." The date matched perfectly, so did my printed name. But the signature, that wasn't mine. It was too smooth, too perfect, like someone practicing control. My pulse spiked. Who signed it? The notary's initials belong to a woman named Parker. She works nights. I asked her this morning. She said your daughter and her husband were there. I stared at Naomi, the words refusing to connect. "They signed it?" Naomi nodded slowly. "You were still under anesthesia." The sound that came out of me wasn't a word, more like a short, hollow laugh. "They transferred the foundation while I was unconscious," I said finally. "Like organ thieves, but for charity." Naomi's eyes softened. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I've seen families do terrible things in my job, but this one." She stopped herself, closing the folder gently. "You should talk to someone who can help you legally." I poured her coffee with hands that barely worked. "I built that foundation from nothing. Every donation, every scholarship, and I stopped before my throat closed up. She called it a fresh start." Naomi didn't interrupt. That's why I liked her. She just listened, the way you do when someone's grief has turned into a strategy. When she left, she slipped the copies into a new envelope and pressed it into my hands. "Keep this safe," she said. "It's proof." After she left, I sat in silence, staring at that envelope. Proof. That word was heavier than any threat. I opened my laptop again. Melissa's face filled the screen. Another press photo. She was standing beside Derek, both of them shaking hands with city officials. Behind them, a new banner. The Hayes Foundation, inspired by family built on integrity. Integrity. The word nearly made me laugh again. I clicked through article after article, watching how she'd rewritten history. Her quotes read like she was reciting from a playbook. "We founded this organization to honor family values. We." Every time I saw that word, I felt my pulse climb another inch. I called the notary office listed on the hospital form. The woman who answered sounded startled when I mentioned the timestamp. "Oh, yes, that night," she said. "Your daughter said you were unable to sign and had given verbal consent earlier." I closed my eyes. I didn't. There was silence on the line. Then quietly, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The paperwork was notarized. Everything appeared legitimate." When I hung up, the air in the room felt thinner. Betrayal doesn't feel like a punch, it's a vacuum. A quiet pulling away of oxygen until the truth stands there, ugly and sharp. By afternoon, I had every document spread out across the dining table. My discharge papers, bank statements, property deeds, the hospital forms Naomi had copied. I read each one until my eyes blurred. Every page told the same story. They'd prepared this for months. Passwords changed, accounts rerouted, power of attorney transferred, all under my nose. I'd been raised to believe family was a safety net. Turns out mine was a trapdoor. At dusk, I opened the blinds and watched the sunlight bleed across the neighbourhood. The magnolia tree outside swayed gently, the same tree I'd planted the year Melissa was born. It was taller now, stronger. So was I. My phone buzzed with a text. A number I didn't recognise. Unknown. Check your email. For a second, I hesitated. Then curiosity won. The email came from a blocked address. Subject line, you should know what they signed. Attached was a PDF. I opened it. The document showed the full transfer agreement, notarized, time-stamped, sealed. I scrolled through the names. There was Derek's signature, Melissa's flourish beside it, my name forged neatly below. And at the bottom, under witness, a new signature. Naomi Fields. But when I zoomed in, I saw it wasn't her full name. Someone had copied it from her badge, sloppily. I dialed Naomi instantly. Did you sign anything that night? What? No, of course not. Her voice shook. Wait, Evelyn, are they using my name? They forged yours too. The silence between us stretched long enough to count every heartbeat. Then they've made a mistake, she said finally, because I can prove where I was that night. That's when I knew I wasn't alone in this anymore. I printed the email and slid it into the same envelope Naomi had given me. The evidence pile was growing, each page heavier than the last. When the clock hit midnight, I poured another cup of coffee. The scar on my chest tugged when I moved, a reminder that I was supposed to be resting. But rest was a luxury for people who hadn't been robbed by their own blood. I laid out the forged forms in a row. The signatures gleamed faintly under the lamp. My name, their handwriting. My life, their property. They thought I was too weak to fight. They were about to learn what strength looks like when you have nothing left to lose. Rain tapped against the window like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. I hadn't realised how quiet the house had become until that moment. No hum of the TV, no background chatter, just the steady rhythm of the storm outside. The laptop screen glowed in the dark, a dozen open tabs full of legal jargon and transfer logs. The deeper I went, the uglier it looked. Every page said the same thing in different fonts. I didn't exist. The clock on the stove blinked 3:12 a.m. I was staring at the digital transfer timestamps again. 3:14 a.m., the same time Naomi said my forged signature appeared. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples when a thought hit me. Hospitals have security cameras. Everything in that building is recorded. Every hallway, every transaction, every face. I grabbed my phone and dialed the hospital's administration office. No answer, of course, at this hour. But there was one person who might still be awake, Naomi. She picked up after one ring. You okay? She asked. Do you remember what room they used to sign that paperwork? I said. She paused. Room B12, near the ICU nurse's desk. Why? I need to see it. Naomi exhaled softly. Evelyn, that's restricted footage. I know, I said, but if I'm right, it's not just about me anymore. They forged your name too. There was a silence, then a small sigh that sounded like resignation. Give me a few hours, she said. By the time morning broke, my coffee had gone cold and my eyes burned from staring at the same documents over and over. At 7:30, a message came through. From Naomi Fields. Subject, you didn't imagine it. I clicked the attachment, hands shaking. The video loaded slowly, grainy footage, timestamp glowing in the corner. March 8th, 3:14 a.m. My stomach tightened. There they were. Melissa in a blush pink coat, her hair perfectly styled even in the middle of the night. Derek beside her, flipping through a folder like he was closing a real estate deal. The notary sat across the table, pen poised. My name lay at the bottom of the document, waiting. Let's finalise this now, Melissa said, her voice calm, confident, like she'd done it 100 times. Derek nodded. She gave verbal consent. You can proceed. The notary hesitated. Are you sure she's aware? She's sedated, Melissa interrupted, flashing a tight smile. It's already been discussed. My pulse pounded in my ears as the pen met paper. Melissa's hand glided over the signature line, looping the letters like a painter, adding the last brushstroke. Then Derek pressed his thumbprint beside it, sealing the crime with care. The notary stamped the page and said quietly, "All signatures are complete." And that was it. The sound of the stamp hitting paper felt louder than thunder. I watched it again and again. Each time, something inside me hardened. Not just anger, but clarity. People say betrayal breaks you. It doesn't. It defines your next move. I took screenshots, timestamped them, then copied the file to 3 separate drives. One for me, one for my lawyer, one for Naomi. If Melissa had built her empire on deception, I was about to pull out the foundation brick by brick. By afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside the hospital, envelope of copies on the passenger seat. Charleston's sky had cleared, sunlight glinting off the wet pavement. Everything looked clean, refreshed, ironic given the filth I was about to uncover. Inside, Naomi met me by the vending machines. She wore her scrubs, hair pulled into a loose bun, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. "You have no idea how many rules I just broke," she whispered. "I know," I said, "and I'll make sure you never get blamed for it." We walked quietly through the corridor, past the nurse's station. Every beep and distant voice made my skin crawl. Room B12 was at the end of the hall, the same one in the footage. The notary's desk sat empty, papers stacked neatly. I wondered how many lives had been quietly rewritten here. Naomi handed me a small drive. "This is a direct copy," she said. "Chain of custody proof is intact. If this goes public, it can't be denied." "Good," I said, sliding it into my purse, "because that's exactly what I plan to do." She looked at me, surprised. "You're going public," I smiled faintly. "Not yet. First, I want them to know I know." On the drive home, the video replayed in my mind like a bad commercial. Her smile, that champagne-coloured coat, the pen gliding across paper. She hadn't just stolen from me. She'd performed it, rehearsed and polished. That was the part that stuck. Back home, I opened my laptop again. I set up a new email draft addressed to Melissa and Derek. I attached the screenshots one by one. The subject line was simple: "I saw what you signed." For the message body, I wrote only this: "It's incredible what cameras can see when you forget they're watching." I hovered over the send button for a full minute before clicking it. The whoosh sound was oddly satisfying, like the first domino tipping. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the neighbourhood come to life. Dog walkers, joggers, morning deliveries, all those tiny rituals of people who still believed their world was intact. My phone buzzed. A single text. "Melissa, we need to talk." I didn't reply. Talking was for people who still had something to explain. Instead, I opened the video one last time and let it play while I folded laundry, the normalcy of the task grounding me. When her voice echoed through the speakers, "She's sedated. It's already been discussed." I didn't flinch anymore. I just listened, the way you listen to evidence before you make your case. The storm had passed outside, but the air still smelled like rain. I looked down at the drive resting on the table, gleaming faintly under the kitchen light. Proof, quiet, and undeniable. Sometimes revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with a file name. The sound of tyres on gravel snapped me awake. I hadn't realised I'd fallen asleep on the couch, laptop still open, the video frozen on Melissa's smiling face. Through the window, I saw a silver Lexus pull into the driveway. Her Lexus. My pulse kicked up, sharp and unwanted. For a few seconds, I thought about pretending not to be home, but her reflection was already in the glass. Coat pressed, hair perfect, holding a bottle of wine like she was arriving for brunch. She rang the doorbell once, then again. I opened the door without a word. "Mom," she said brightly, her tone all sugar and PR polish. "You look great. I brought something nice. Thought we could talk." She stepped inside before I invited her. The smell of her perfume filled the hallway, sweet and artificial, like everything else about her lately. She set the wine on the counter and took a long look around the room, her gaze pausing on the stack of papers spread across the dining table. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked sharp for half a second. "You've been busy," she said lightly, "trying to make sense of things," I said, my voice even. "I figured," she replied, opening the wine without asking. "It's been a lot." She poured 2 glasses, handed me one. I didn't take it. "Melissa," I said, "you forged my signature." Her hand froze mid-air. For the first time, the performance cracked. Mom, that's a serious accusation. It's also true. I've seen the footage. For a moment, the only sound was the faint pop of the wine bottle settling. Then she set her glass down and crossed her arms. Who gave you that? She asked. Does it matter? It does when people break confidentiality agreements. You could be in trouble. I almost laughed. You stole my name while I was unconscious, and you're worried about my legal exposure? She exhaled sharply through her nose. You're being dramatic again. It wasn't like that. Dad and I... Derek, I cut in, is not your father. Her face hardened. Fine. Derek and I did what was necessary. You were unstable. The surgery, the medication, the stress. I was sedated, I said quietly, not unstable. She blinked, eyes darting away for the first time. We had to secure the foundation. The board needed leadership. You weren't... alive, I finished for her. She didn't answer. I walked to the counter, opened the drawer where my phone lay face down, the recorder app already running. I picked it up slowly like it was just another idle movement. You planned this, I said, months in advance. You asked for my passwords. You rewrote the documents. You called it transition planning. Her jaw tightened. I was trying to protect what you built. You renamed it, I said. You called it the Hayes Foundation. You deleted every mention of me. She took a sip of her wine, trying to regain control. It was branding. You know how donors are. They need fresh stories, fresh faces. I didn't realize mine was expired. Her mouth twitched, but she kept her tone calm. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. This victim thing doesn't suit you. That line almost made me laugh. It was her go-to move. Gaslight, deflect, minimize. But this time I didn't flinch. I stepped closer, my voice low. You threw a party while I was under anesthesia. She stared back, blank for half a heartbeat. We needed closure. Closure? For the family, she said softly. I am the family. Her eyes flashed. Not guilt, just annoyance. You're twisting this again. You always do. I tilted my head. You signed my name. She didn't answer, but the silence said everything. You realize, I continued, what you did isn't just betrayal. It's a felony. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You wouldn't press charges. You'd ruin us all. I smiled, a small, tired thing. You already did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she straightened her coat, her voice clipped and professional again. Going public will hurt you more than me. No one wants to hear about a bitter mother attacking her daughter. Think about how that looks. Funny, I said. That's exactly what Derek said to the notary. Her expression froze. That tiny flicker of panic was all I needed. She grabbed her purse. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but it's mine to make. At the door, she hesitated. You should rest, Mom, not thinking clearly. I looked her straight in the eye. I've never thought clearer. She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house, long after her footsteps faded down the driveway. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the silence settle back in. Then I picked up my phone from the counter. The recording timer glowed red. 48 minutes, 43 seconds, every word captured. I saved the file under a new name, melissaconfession.mp3. The next step wasn't anger, it was documentation. Every email, every file, every lie. I printed the transcript and added it to the growing pile on the dining table. The evidence wasn't just a paper trail anymore, it was a map, and it pointed straight to them. Outside, the sky was deep blue, the last light of day fading behind the trees. I closed the blinds, poured myself a fresh glass of water and sat down to read through my notes. They thought they'd buried me under paperwork and polite smiles. But I wasn't buried. I was building something, quietly, carefully, and this time it wouldn't be for charity. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, hitting the pile of papers on my dining table like a spotlight. The evidence sat there in silence, signatures, transfers, and that drive Naomi had given me. My coffee had gone cold again before I realized I'd been staring at one page for nearly an hour. I needed more than proof. I needed a plan. That's when I remembered Helen Branson. Judge Helen Branson had been a friend for nearly 30 years, once a county judge, now retired, but still sharper than any lawyer I'd met. We'd met through the foundation back when I was raising funds for community legal aid. I'd helped her set up a scholarship program for underprivileged law students. She owed me one, though she'd never admit it. I called her that afternoon. Evie Carver, she said, her voice warm but cautious. You sound like someone about to commit a righteous crime. Not yet, I said, but I might need your advice before I do something irreversible. Good, she said. That's my favourite kind of call. Come by, I'll make tea. Her townhouse was just outside downtown Charleston, tucked behind an iron gate wrapped in ivy. Inside smelled like lemon oil and law books. She poured tea the way she used to sentence people, steady without wasting a drop. When I finished explaining everything, the forged signature, the stolen foundation, the hospital footage, she sat back and whistled softly. They really thought you wouldn't survive that surgery, she said. That's the only reason they got bold. They were right about one thing, I said, half smiling. I didn't die, and that's turning into a problem for them. Helen chuckled under her breath. That's the spirit. Then her tone shifted, precise and measured. Legally, you're holding gold. That footage alone could bury them. But it's not just about the law, Evelyn. It's about narrative. If this goes public, they'll try to paint you as confused or bitter. You need to control the story before they do. I nodded. I already started documenting everything. Recordings, emails, timestamps. Good. Keep your emotions out of it. Let the evidence do the talking. But before you swing the hammer, we need one thing, a financial trail. Find where the money went. That's the part I can't see, I said. They rerouted the accounts, closed mine. Helen tapped her cup lightly. Then you'll need help. I know someone who specialises in that kind of digging. She opened a drawer and pulled out a card. Michael Boone, Financial Investigations and Forensic Audits. He's discreet, she said, and he used to work for the State Fraud Division. Tell him I sent you. I slipped the card into my purse. What about Melissa and Derek? Helen's eyes met mine, calm but sharp. Don't confront them again. Not yet. Let them believe you're still catching up. The moment they know how much you've uncovered, they'll start covering their tracks. You want them relaxed, overconfident. That word made me smile. Overconfident was Melissa's default setting. Helen leaned forward, lowering her voice. One more thing. If they forged your signature on legal documents, that's elder financial abuse. You could involve Adult Protective Services. I frowned. I'm not ready to be labelled a victim. Good, she said. Then label yourself the plaintiff. Her words hit harder than I expected. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent a lifetime being careful, polite, letting people believe I was soft because I didn't shout. Maybe it was time they learned silence had its own kind of volume. Helen stood, pulling a small metal key from her pocket. You'll need a safe place to store your files. This is my old lockbox key. It's in the basement, behind the second cabinet. Keep the originals there. And Evelyn, she said, pausing at the doorway, don't let revenge be your only motive. Let it be the byproduct of justice. That night, I drove home with the window cracked open, cool air rushing in. The streets glowed with rain lights, and for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel as heavy. When I got home, I opened my laptop and searched Michael Boone. Former state investigator, retired 2 years ago. Clean record. Specialised in corporate theft and charity fraud. He'd even worked on a case where a son drained his mother's estate. Poetic, really. I sent a short message. Mr. Boone, Judge Branson suggested I contact you regarding a private matter. It involves possible fraud within a family-run foundation. I have evidence, including video. Please advise availability. He replied 20 minutes later. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. my office. Bring everything. I stared at the message for a while, the reality of it settling in. It wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about precision. Before going to bed, I gathered everything Helen told me to protect. The forged forms, the video, the confession recording, Naomi's copies, my notes. I placed them in a folder and slid it into a tote bag. Then I locked the rest in Helen's old box downstairs, just as she'd instructed. The sound of the key turning in the lock was oddly satisfying, like sealing a chapter I'd already outgrown. I looked around the house, my house, and realised how different it felt now. The fear that had haunted every corner had been replaced by something steadier. Not peace, exactly, more like readiness. The clock on the mantel struck midnight. I poured myself a final cup of tea, the way Helen always did, and stood by the window. Charleston slept quietly outside, unaware that a war of paperwork and reputation was already underway. Melissa had always been good at smiling for the cameras, but soon the lens would turn the other way, and this time The footage wouldn't lie. The next morning, the streets of Charleston were still damp from last night's rain. I drove downtown with my tote bag on the passenger seat, every file neatly arranged, labelled and ready. I didn't bother with makeup. Revenge doesn't need mascara. It just needs focus. Michael Boone's office was tucked between a law firm and an old coffee shop. The sign on his door was simple: Forensic Financial Services. I pushed the door open to the smell of stale coffee and printer toner. He looked up from behind a desk piled with files. A tall man in his 60s, sleeves rolled up, silver hair and an expression that said he'd seen too many people learn too late who they could and couldn't trust. "You must be Mrs. Carver," he said. "Helen told me you'd be coming." I nodded, taking a seat. "I assume she gave you the short version." "Short, yes. Sweet, no." He leaned back. "You said you have evidence of unauthorized asset transfer?" I opened the folder and began laying everything out: the forged signatures, the time-stamped footage, Naomi's report, the new foundation filings. He glanced through each one silently, eyes narrowing with every page. When he reached the transfer documents, he let out a quiet whistle. "They were bold," he said, "but sloppy. They left digital footprints everywhere." "Good," I said. He pointed at the timestamps. "See this?" He highlighted a routing number. "It's from an offshore intermediary account. A shell company, Hayes Legacy Initiative LLC. You recognize it?" I shook my head. "But the name fits." "Of course it does," he said. "When people steal, they can't help branding their crimes." He turned his monitor toward me, pulling up a spreadsheet full of transactions. "Your foundation's account was drained over 3 nights. The money was split into smaller transfers, classic layering technique, but one of those accounts leads back to a property management firm in Savannah. Guess who's on the lease?" "Melissa," I said flatly. "Melissa and Derek," he corrected. "Joint ownership. That's where they parked part of the funds, under a property LLC." I stared at the screen, the numbers spinning in my mind like a bad dream. "How much?" "Just under 300,000. My breath caught. That was money for scholarships, for kids who'd never have had a chance otherwise. He looked up. "You want to go to court, you'll need more than anger. You'll need a narrative that makes sense to a judge. You can't just say, 'My daughter stole from me.' You have to show the pattern: intent, benefit, concealment." "I have her on video forging my name," I said. "That's your anchor," he replied. "Now we build the chain around it." I nodded. "Can we trace where the rest went?" He cracked his knuckles. "We can trace anything." The printer whirred as he generated a summary report. The noise filled the silence between us. When he handed me the papers, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. "If you want my advice," he said, "don't go public yet. Let me dig deeper. When people like your daughter think they've gotten away with it, they start spending, and spending leaves a trail longer than guilt." I smiled faintly. "You sound like my old accountant." "Your old accountant probably never had to track your daughter through offshore banking." He wasn't wrong. We shook hands before I left, and he promised to call once he had enough for a full report. Outside, the city felt different, louder, brighter. I walked past cafe windows filled with people sipping lattes, talking about vacations and promotions. I wondered how many of them had no idea who would betray them if money entered the equation. Back home, I placed Boone's report on my kitchen counter and poured myself a glass of water. I stood there for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, trying to process the sheer audacity of it all. Melissa hadn't just taken my foundation. She'd weaponized it, used it to fund her lifestyle, her social climb, her new identity as a philanthropist. That evening, I logged into the foundation's website again. New photos had gone up. Melissa at a ribbon-cutting ceremony smiling beside Derek. A caption read, "The Hayes Foundation donates $25,000 to underprivileged youth programs." 25,000 from my stolen money. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure what stung more, the theft or the irony. Then I noticed a smaller link at the bottom of the page. Press inquiries, pr@hayesfoundation.org. I clicked it. A contact form opened. I typed one line, nothing more. Interesting how integrity looks when you steal it from someone else. I didn't send it. I just stared at the words for a while before closing the window. By midnight, I was sitting at the dining table again, surrounded by evidence, the soft buzz of the ceiling fan cutting through the silence. I thought about Helen's advice. Let them feel safe first. Melissa and Derek were sleeping soundly somewhere, maybe dreaming about headlines and handshakes. They didn't know the one thing every thief forgets. Every transfer leaves a shadow, and shadows always point back to the source. I opened Boone's folder one more time, tracing my finger along the final line of his report. Next step, trace connections to secondary accounts and report within 7 business days. 7 days. I could wait 7 days. I closed the folder, pushed it neatly into the center of the table, and turned off the light. The glow from the city outside flickered through the blinds, striping the papers in silver lines. It almost looked like a map, and I already knew exactly where it would lead. The following week crawled by, every day stitched with equal parts silence and strategy. I spent most of it at home, letting Boone work his financial magic while I stayed busy preparing mine. My house had become a war room. Folders, post-its, voice memos, each one a reminder that revenge, done properly, looks a lot like organisation. When the phone finally rang, I knew it would be him. Boone's voice carried a mix of triumph and disbelief. "You were right," he said. "They've been funneling money through 3 accounts, not 1. 2 under Derek's business aliases, 1 in your daughter's name. Personal checking, masked as administrative reimbursements. How much?" "Total movement so far, $468,000, he said, "and they're using foundation grants to buy property shares in Savannah, all documented." I let the number sit in the air for a moment. "That's almost $500,000 in charity money." "Yep. And they were dumb enough to do it before fully dissolving your authorization from the bank records. That means every transaction still technically ties back to your trust. If you file a complaint, they're toast." My fingers tapped the kitchen counter lightly. "Not yet. I want something stronger, something they can't talk their way out of." Boone hesitated. "You already have a forged signature and theft. What are you waiting for?" "A confession," I said. He chuckled. You really are your husband's wife. He was the same way, wanted proof wrapped in their own words." I smiled faintly. "Then you understand why I can't stop now." When we hung up, I knew what I needed to do next. Melissa and Derek still believed they had control, the money, the brand, the narrative. What they didn't realize was that people with control tend to talk too much when they think they've won. That night, I called Melissa. "Mom," she said, her tone sharp with surprise. "You're calling me?" "What's going on?" "I've been thinking," I said carefully. "Maybe I overreacted. Maybe we should talk in person about the foundation." There was a pause. I could almost hear her calculating on the other end. "I'd like that," she said finally, all syrup again. "We can clear the air. Derek and I were actually talking about how to make things right." "Good," I said. "Come by tomorrow night. I'll make dinner." She hesitated. "Dinner? At your house?" "Yes," I said. "It's still my house, isn't it?" That made her laugh. Brittle, but genuine. "All right, Mom. We'll be there at 7. I hung up and set my phone down, staring at the blank wall across from me. The last time they'd both been in my kitchen, they'd been taking inventory for their inheritance. This time, I'd be taking something from them. Their masks. The next day, I cleaned the house as if it were any other dinner night. Set the table, lit candles, even made Derek's favourite roast, the one he used to brag about to guests as my mother-in-law's southern classic. The details mattered. Everything had to look like peace. When they arrived, Melissa carried a bottle of champagne. Derek looked uncomfortable in his tailored jacket. Not guilt, just the kind of nervous energy men have when they suspect someone's outsmarted them. "Wow," Melissa said, walking in. "You really went all out." "Just like old times," I said. Dinner was polite. Too polite. Forks clinking. Small talk filling the gaps. I could tell Derek was waiting for the part where I'd break down or beg for understanding, but I wasn't there to perform. After dessert, I leaned back and smiled. "You know, I watched that gala video again." Melissa's fork froze midair. "Oh?" "You looked beautiful," I said. "Strong, like someone who finally got what she wanted." Her smile returned, thin and wary. "We were just trying to honour your work, Mom." "Honour," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting word for forgery." The silence that followed was heavy enough to stop the clock. Derek spoke first. "Now hold on." "No," I said, my tone calm. "You hold on, because the next thing you say might determine whether I call the police or not." He swallowed, his jaw tightening. "You wouldn't." I tilted my head. "Wouldn't I?" Melissa leaned forward. Mom, please, you're emotional. Actually, I said, cutting her off, I'm recording. Her face went pale. You're what? Recording, I repeated, nodding toward the small voice-activated device sitting under the napkin holder. It's amazing what you can buy on Amazon these days. Derek shot up from his chair, eyes wide. That's illegal. No, I said, still calm. South Carolina's a one-party consent state, and guess what? I'm that one party. Melissa's voice trembled. You're trying to trap us. Trap? I smiled. No, sweetheart, I'm giving you a chance. Tell me why you did it. Now tell me why my name wasn't enough for you. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, quietly, you don't understand. You were holding me back. I blinked. Holding you back? You kept everything small, local, quiet, sentimental. I could have made it national. You never let me lead. I stared at her, almost amazed by the audacity. So you stole it. I rebranded it, she said defensively. Made it better. People respect me now. They listen. Do they? I asked softly. Or do they just see a thief with good lighting? She pushed back her chair and stood, shaking her head. You've gone too far. This recording is my insurance policy, I said, and it's already uploaded. Her mouth fell open. You're bluffing. Derek's voice was low, angry. Delete it, Evelyn. I met his eyes. You don't get to tell me what to erase anymore. The clock on the wall ticked between us, the only sound in the room. Then slowly, Melissa sat back down. You don't know what you've started, she whispered. I smiled faintly. Sure I do. It's called accountability. They left not long after, slamming the door so hard the candles flickered out. The house fell into silence again, but this time it was the kind of silence that hums with victory. I picked up the recorder, stopped the track, and watched the little red light blink off. Then I played it back, listening to Melissa's voice confess in her own words, the sound crisp, undeniable. It wasn't just a recording, it was truth. Captured, sealed, and waiting for the right moment to speak louder than either of them ever had. The next morning felt too quiet for what had just happened. The dinner scene from the night before replayed in my mind like a courtroom drama. Melissa's pale face, Derek's voice cracking with anger, and the recorder's tiny red light blinking like justice itself. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. Adrenaline is a cruel kind of energy. It keeps you upright when grief would rather knock you down. I made myself coffee and sat by the kitchen window. The recorder sat on the table beside my phone, still loaded with their voices. I played it again just to make sure the sound was as crisp as I remembered. It was. Every word, every sigh, every pause perfectly preserved. Mom, you don't understand. You were holding me back. I rebranded it, made it better. You've gone too far. This recording. And then my line, it's my insurance policy. I didn't realise then how prophetic that sentence would become. At 9 a.m, Boone called. Got your email, he said. That audio you sent, it's gold. Between this and the financial trail, they're cornered. I sipped my coffee. I don't want to corner them. I want them to face it. He hesitated. Well, sometimes those two things are the same. He was right, but life has a funny way of moving faster than your plan. By noon, it wasn't just Boone who had the audio. It was everyone. It started with a text from Naomi. Turn on the news. Now I did. The local morning show's banner read, Charleston philanthropy scandal audio leak raises questions about Hayes Foundation. The screen showed Melissa's face frozen, mid-laugh, the same expression from the gala photo. A reporter's voice narrated over it. An anonymous source leaked an audio recording late last night, allegedly capturing Melissa and Derek Hayes admitting to forging documents related to their mother's charitable foundation. I set my mug down so hard coffee sloshed over the rim. Anonymous source. The anchor continued. The recording, verified by multiple outlets, appears to include direct admissions of fraud, misappropriation of funds, and intent to conceal the transfer of assets. Boone called again. It wasn't me, he said immediately. I didn't think it was. Then who the hell had it? I glanced at the window, the phone, the silence between us. Only 3 people had that recording, me, Boone, and Helen. And one cloud drive. Naomi had asked me to upload everything to a secure link for safekeeping. She'd said she'd make backup copies in case something happened to me. My heart sank, not out of anger, but out of inevitability. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I didn't send it to the press, I swear. But one of the reporters who covers medical malpractice saw the file name in my shared folder. They must have copied it. I exhaled slowly. Naomi, it's okay. Maybe it was time it came out. But it's everywhere, she said, panicked. TV, Twitter, YouTube. They're playing it on loop. Melissa's PR team is scrambling. Good. By afternoon, my phone was a waterfall of notifications. Journalists, board members, even old donors reaching out for comment. The foundation's website went dark. The board had frozen its public operations pending investigation. That night, I turned on the TV again. Melissa and Derek stood outside their downtown office, surrounded by cameras. She looked like she hadn't slept, hair pulled back too tight, foundation thick enough to hide the panic. My mother's been manipulated, she told reporters. Someone took her private recordings out of context. Out of context. The go-to defense for people who don't have one. Derek stepped in. These allegations are false. The Hayes Foundation remains committed to transparency. I muted the TV. Transparency. What an exquisite word when spoken by thieves. The phone rang again. This time it was Helen. Well, she said, half amused, half resigned. Looks like you got your public confession after all. I didn't want it this way. Maybe not, but you couldn't have planned it better. That leak saved you a year of legal back and forth. I stared at the flickering TV. They'll call me vindictive. Let them, she said. They called you invisible once too. You outlived both titles. The next morning, headlines had spread beyond Charleston. National outlets picked it up, calling it the gala betrayal. My phone buzzed non-stop. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly remembered my number. Boone emailed later that day. The banks opened a fraud investigation. The district attorney's office reached out for statements. You should prepare testimony. Testimony. The word carried weight. Legal, deliberate, final. I closed the email and looked out the window at them at the magnolia tree swaying in the morning breeze. A car pulled into the driveway, a different one this time. Reporters, 2 of them. They stood by the gate, shouting questions through the iron bars. Mrs. Carver, did you leak the tape? Do you plan to press charges against your daughter? I closed the curtains. The world wanted a spectacle. I wasn't going to give them one. Later that night, I sat at the dining table again, the same one where Melissa had once raised her wine glass and called me dramatic. The same one where she'd signed away my name without permission. Now the table was covered with headlines, not legal forms. Her empire, dismantled by her own voice. There's a certain justice in that, when the same mouth that denied your truth ends up proving it. I poured myself a glass of water, turned off the lights, and watched the reflection in the window. Somewhere out there, my daughter was spinning her version of the story, rehearsing lines for sympathy. But no performance could erase what the world had already heard. She wanted attention. Now she had it. And this time, I wasn't the one who'd lost control of the narrative. The next 48 hours turned Charleston into a feeding frenzy. News vans lined the street outside my gate, reporters shouting questions like I was some kind of celebrity survivor. I hadn't left the house since the leak, but I didn't need to. The world was already doing my talking for me. Every local paper ran a variation of the same headline: charity scandal, daughter accused of defrauding retired philanthropist mother. The words looked surreal in print, like they belonged to someone else's tragedy, but it wasn't fiction. It was my life, dissected between advertisements for car dealerships and weekend weather reports. On the 3rd morning, Boone called again. You might want to sit down, he said. I already am. The state opened an official investigation. Fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse, the whole package. The DA's office reached out. They're reviewing the footage and your recordings. I stared out the window, watching a reporter's camera crew argue over who'd get the best angle. So it's real, I said quietly. It's real, Boone confirmed. And Derek's company? It's being audited. Turns out those shell accounts he used for your foundation money also handled a few client funds. That means federal jurisdiction. Federal? I repeated. He chuckled darkly. Oh, they're in trouble, Evelyn. Big trouble. And the irony? Every piece of evidence came from their own arrogance. After the call, I turned on the TV. A panel of talking heads debated whether Melissa was the real villain or just a product of generational control. One anchor suggested she might have been pressured by family dynamics. It almost made me laugh. Leave it to television to romanticize greed. Then, around noon, my phone buzzed with a private number. I hesitated before answering. Mom, Melissa's voice came through, quieter, strained. I need to talk to you. I didn't say anything. They froze our accounts, she said. Derek's being investigated. They took our passports. Everything's collapsing. I know, I said. There was a pause. You leaked it, didn't you? I didn't need to, I said simply. You did it to yourselves. Her breath caught. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed us. No, Melissa, I said evenly. You destroyed yourself when you decided money mattered more than blood. She started to cry, not softly, but the desperate, angry kind of crying people do when the consequences finally arrive. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. You thought wrong, she went silent. I could hear the faint hum of a TV in the background, probably the same news coverage I was watching. Finally, she whispered, What happens now? Whatever the law decides, I said, that's out of my hands. When the call ended, I sat there for a long while, staring at the phone. There was a time when hearing my daughter cry would have broken me. Now it only made me feel tired, not vengeful, not vindicated, just tired. By evening, Helen dropped by unannounced, still dressed in her judge's grey blazer. I figured you'd need some fresh air, she said, setting down a grocery bag, and something stronger than tea. She pulled out a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. We sat on the porch, the city glowing faintly in the distance, sirens echoing somewhere downtown. She poured us both a drink. So, she said, how does it feel watching Karma work retail? I let out a short laugh. Louder than I expected, Helen nodded. It always is. You're handling this well, all things considered. I'm not sure handling is the right word, I said. I just stopped pretending to drown. She clinked her glass against mine. That's the most honest kind of recovery. The night air smelled like wet grass and river salt. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Helen said, you know, there's still the matter of what happens next. You can file civil charges to recover what's left, or you can let the state handle it criminally. I'll let the system do its job, I said. I don't need to ruin her. Just stop her. That's still justice, she said softly. The following day, I woke up to a headline that almost made me drop my coffee. Hayes Foundation under federal review. CEO steps down. Melissa had resigned. The board forced her out, citing ethical conflicts. Derek, meanwhile, had been subpoenaed for financial fraud. The same reporters who once praised their philanthropic elegance now called them Charleston's cautionary tale. It was strange, seeing the downfall play out in real time. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. I just felt the slow relief of truth settling where lies had lived too long. Later that evening, Boone sent me another message. The DA's office may call you for testimony soon. Just be prepared. Prepared. The word had a weight to it, but not the kind that frightened me. I'd already survived surgery, betrayal, and humiliation. Courtrooms didn't scare me. Silence did, the kind I'd lived with for too long. I walked outside to the edge of the yard where the magnolia tree stood. Its petals had started to fall, white against the dark soil. I bent down and touched one, its edges soft and bruised. In the distance, thunder rolled. Rain was coming again. I looked up at the sky and thought about everything that had happened, every lie, every forged signature, every quiet act of defiance that led to this point. It wasn't victory I felt. It was closure. Not the kind Melissa had toasted, but the kind earned through endurance. When I went back inside, the phone buzzed once more. A text from Boone. The board voted to reinstate your name as the founder. The Carver Foundation is officially yours again. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. No smile, no tears, just breath. Long, steady, certain. Outside, the rain began to fall, tapping softly against the windows like applause no one needed to hear. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, wedged between a utility bill and a flyer for lawn care services. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, careful, masculine, deliberate. Derek Hayes. For a moment, I just stood by the mailbox, staring at it. The ink looked pressed, not written, as if each letter had been carved into the paper by someone trying to make his guilt look neat. I took it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and made myself tea before touching it again. When I finally opened it, the smell of cologne hit me first. Expensive, sterile, the kind that tries too hard to prove something. The first line read, Evelyn, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I owe you this. He was right about that much. The letter went on for 4 pages, each word trying to sound humble, each sentence dressed up in regret that didn't quite fit. I made mistakes. I didn't mean to hurt you. Things spiraled faster than we expected. We. Always we. Even in remorse, he needed company. Melissa thought she was protecting the family legacy. I thought I was helping her. You have to understand, she wanted your approval so badly she tried to become you. But in doing that, she forgot who she was. I stopped reading for a moment and looked out the window. The rain had come back, thin and steady, brushing against the glass like fingertips. It felt almost cinematic. The kind of scene you'd expect in a movie where forgiveness arrives at the perfect emotional cue. But real life isn't written that neatly. I picked the letter back up. I'm cooperating with the investigation. I've turned over all my accounts. The DA offered a reduced sentence if I testify against Melissa. I didn't want to, but after what's happened, I don't see another way. I let out a quiet breath. He didn't see another way because there wasn't one. They'd boxed themselves in with their own ambition. I know you don't believe me, but I did love the foundation and I admired you. You built something that mattered. I just lost sight of that in the chase for money and reputation. If it means anything, I'm sorry. I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. There was a postscript. For what it's worth, Melissa still thinks she can fix this. Please don't destroy her completely. She's her mother's daughter, even if she forgot how to act like it. That line stayed with me long after I'd put the letter away. Her mother's daughter. It sounded less like an apology and more like an accusation. I walked to the living room, where the old foundation plaque sat on the mantel. The brass letters still gleamed, untouched by time or scandal. The Carver Foundation, founded 1996, built on compassion. Compassion. The word had always been my weakness and my weapon. That afternoon, I drove to Boone's office with the letter in my purse. He was waiting with a thick folder when I arrived. "We've got the full report," he said. "Federal auditors confirmed the offshore transfers. Derek's cooperating and they're recommending prosecution for both." He looked up, gauging my reaction. "You all right?" "I got a letter from him," I said. "He's testifying." Boone nodded slowly. "That'll seal it." "I don't want her in prison," I said quietly. His brow furrowed. "And you sure about that?" "I want accountability, not annihilation. There's a difference." He studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You really are something, Evelyn. Most people would want blood." "I've already had enough of that," I said, glancing down at the faint scar visible beneath my blouse. He chuckled softly. "Fair enough. I'll forward everything to your attorney. You'll probably get called in next week to review the restitution agreement." When I left his office, the sun had broken through the clouds. The light was sharp, almost blinding after days of rain. I stood on the sidewalk, the envelope in my hand, and watched people hurry past with their coffees and phones, the living proof that life keeps moving even when yours has been paused by betrayal. I drove home with the windows cracked open, the wind filling the car with that clean post-storm smell. Somewhere along the way I passed a billboard with the old foundation logo still on it. My name beside the new slogan Melissa had added, "Building Brighter Futures." I almost laughed. There was something poetic about it. The brightness born from exposure. At home, I tucked Derek's letter into a drawer, not out of sentiment but preservation. Proof of remorse is still proof, even when it arrives late. By evening, the phone buzzed again. This time it was Naomi. "You should see this," she said. She sent me a link, a local news article. The headline read, "Former Hayes Foundation Director Confesses, Cooperates in Fraud Case." The subheading said, "Sources close to the family say Melissa Hayes has gone silent amid legal proceedings." I scrolled through, my eyes catching on one line near the bottom. A spokesperson for the Carver Foundation confirmed that Dr. Evelyn Carver has resumed her role as founder and trustee. Dr. Evelyn Carver. It had been months since I'd seen my full name attached to that title. It didn't feel triumphant, it just felt correct. I stood by the window, watching the evening light fade behind the magnolia tree. The petals had started to fall, scattering across the grass like small white truths, visible, quiet, unavoidable. There was no celebration, no grand gesture, no cinematic closure, just calm. I went to the kitchen, made another cup of tea, and sat at it that had once been the scene of so many lies. The recorder was still there, though now silent, its red light long gone. I picked it up, turned it over once, and placed it in a drawer beside the letter. One piece of evidence, one apology, two sides of the same story. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the magnolia leaves. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again, faint, fading, familiar. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't brace myself for the storm. The morning sun stretched across my kitchen table, falling on the folder that carried the official seal of reinstatement. The Carver Foundation was mine again, on paper, in record, and in name. I ran my fingers across the embossed gold lettering, tracing the curves of my signature. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like restoration, quiet and overdue. The first call came from the board chair. "Dr. Carver," she said formally, her tone cautious. "We'd be honoured if you'd attend the rebranding meeting next week. We're restructuring the mission statement with your guidance." My guidance. The words felt strange after being erased for so long. I told her I'd come. Then I called Naomi. She picked up, sounding half asleep. "Please tell me it's good news this time," she said. "It's better than good." I told her. "The foundation's back." She let out a whoop so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Evelyn, you did it." "No," I said. "We did." There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "You know, most people in your place would have walked away. You stayed." "I built this place to help people who thought they didn't matter," I said. "Now I understand that includes me." That afternoon, I drove to the Foundation's downtown office. The sign on the building still read Hayes Foundation, but the paint had already started peeling. I smiled at that. Poetic justice in maintenance neglect. Inside, staff moved quietly through hallways that had once been filled with nervous energy and pretense. A few familiar faces stopped when they saw me. Some looked embarrassed, some relieved. One young assistant, barely out of college, whispered, "Welcome back, Dr. Carver." I thanked her, walked past the glass conference room where Melissa had once given her first keynote speech, and stepped into my old office. The walls were bare now, the framed photos were gone, the bookshelves half empty. But the scent of old paper and lemon oil lingered, the kind of permanence that betrayal can't scrub away. I placed the reinstatement letter on the desk and sat down. For the first time in a long time, the chair didn't feel like it belonged to a ghost. A knock came at the door. Naomi appeared, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you'd want the strong stuff," she said. "You read my mind." She looked around. "It's quiet in here." "It'll get loud again," I said. "But this time, for the right reasons." She smiled. "You really going to reopen the scholarship program?" "Yes, and not just that." I leaned forward. "We're going back to what it was meant to be. Small, personal, community-based. Real people, real stories. No more galas or PR campaigns. Just help." Naomi nodded. "That's exactly what Charleston needs again." The board meeting took place the following week in the same glass-walled room. New members filled the chairs, most of them young, eager, idealistic. A few of the older ones, the ones who'd looked the other way when Melissa rewrote the bylaws, avoided my eyes. That was fine. The room didn't need apologies, it needed direction. I stood at the head of the table, hands clasped loosely. "We lost our way," I said simply, "but loss can be useful if you know how to learn from it. This foundation wasn't built on prestige or branding. It was built on people who believed kindness was louder than money. Let's make it that again." When the meeting ended, the applause was quiet but sincere, a different kind of noise. Humble, grounded. Later, as I walked outside, a breeze caught the new banner being installed over the entrance. The name gleamed in fresh lettering. The Carver Integrity Trust, Naomi's suggestion, Helen's legal blessing, and Boone's favourite word. Integrity. I stood there for a moment, watching it sway in the wind. The city noise around me seemed distant, horns, voices, the hum of life continuing. Back home that evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch. The magnolia tree was in bloom again, petals thick and fragrant in the warm air. Helen called just to check in. "So," she said, "how does it feel to have your name back on the wall?" I smiled. "Like it never should have left," she chuckled. "Justice served quietly, my favourite kind." "It's funny," I said. "They thought the foundation made me powerful, but it wasn't the foundation, it was the work, the purpose." "That's what they never understood," she replied. "People who chase control always mistake visibility for strength. Just you've got the kind that doesn't need a microphone. When we hung up, the air around me settled into that strange, peaceful hum that only comes after chaos has done its worst. I thought about Melissa, where she might be, what story she was telling herself now. There was no hatred left, only distance. The phone buzzed. A message from Boone. Press wants a quote. Want me to handle it? I typed back. Just tell them this. The Carver Foundation was never about revenge or redemption. It was about resilience. Then I set the phone aside and watched the sun sink low over the horizon. Somewhere, a wind chime clinked softly. The sound reminded me of the first day I opened the foundation decades ago. Nervous, hopeful, terrified of failure. Funny how the beginning and the rebuilding felt the same. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the cool evening air settle against my skin. The world had gone quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of loss anymore. It was the kind that comes when something finally falls back into place, quietly, decisively, exactly where it belongs. The knock came just as the light was fading, soft but deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone. The foundation had just wrapped its reopening week, and all I wanted was silence. I opened the door halfway, and there she was, Melissa. She looked smaller than I remembered, the kind of small that comes from exhaustion, not age. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her lipstick uneven, the sharpness in her eyes replaced by something duller. She held a paper bag in her hands, like an offering. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly. It took me a second to find my voice. "Melissa, can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, scanning the living room like it was a museum exhibit from another life. Her gaze landed on the foundation plaque on the wall, the one with my name restored in gold. She flinched a little, then looked away. "I brought coffee," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "Your favourite, hazelnut." I didn't touch it. "What do you want?" She hesitated. "To talk." I folded my arms. "Talk, then." Her shoulders slumped. "They're saying terrible things about me. Reporters, online. You wouldn't believe the comments." "I would," I said. She wouldn't deserve that. There was a long silence, the kind that fills a room when there's too much history for words. Finally, she spoke again. "I wanted to say I'm sorry." Her voice trembled. "Not the kind of sorry you write in a statement or say to get sympathy. I mean it. I hurt you. I betrayed you. I lied." I said nothing. She kept going, words spilling faster now. "I thought I was doing what Dad wanted. He said we needed to protect the family legacy. I believed him. I believed Derek. I thought you'd recover and we'd fix it quietly. But when I saw that recording, when I heard myself, God, I sounded like him. Like Dad. Cold. Calculating. I didn't even recognize my own voice." Her hands shook as she ran them through her hair. "They both left me. Derek's gone. Dad won't talk to me. Everything's falling apart, and for the first time, I can't blame anyone but myself." I looked at her closely. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind grief leaves when it decides to stay. "Do you want forgiveness?" I asked, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what I want. Maybe just for you to stop hating me." "I don't hate you," I said. "I stopped doing that a long time ago." She blinked. "Then what do you feel?" "Sadness," I said simply. "You were my daughter before you became my opponent." That broke her. She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled with quiet sobs. I sat down across from her. For a moment, I saw not the woman who forged my signature, but the little girl who used to leave crayon drawings on my desk. "You can't undo what you did," I said, my voice calm. "But you can live differently. That's the only apology that matters." She nodded, still crying. "I don't know where to start." I poured her a glass of water and set it on the table. "Start by facing what's left, not what's lost." She looked up, her eyes red. "You really rebuilt everything." "Yes," I said, "but not because I wanted revenge. I did it because I refused to let you be the last word on who I am." Melissa took a shaky breath. "Can I help with the foundation? I can volunteer anything." The request hung between us like a fragile thread. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "You can volunteer," I said finally, "but not for me, for them. The women at the shelters, the ones rebuilding their lives. You'll report to Naomi. No special treatment, no title, no press, just work." She nodded quickly. "Yes, anything." "I don't need an apology every time we meet," I said. "I need you to show up and mean it." For the first time in months, she smiled. A real smile, small but human. "I can do that." We sat there for a while, not as enemies, not as mother and daughter exactly, but as two people who had finally run out of lies. Before she left, she turned at the door. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for not destroying me." "I didn't save you either," I replied. "That's something you'll have to do yourself." She nodded, eyes glistening, then walked out into the evening light. The door clicked shut behind her. I stood there a moment longer, looking at the spot where she'd stood. The faint scent of hazelnut lingered in the air. I poured myself a cup, even though I didn't really want it, and took a sip. It tasted bittersweet, the kind of flavour that stays even after you're done drinking. Outside, the magnolia petals had started to fall again, scattering across the porch in soft white drifts. I stepped out barefoot, feeling them crush gently under my feet. The air smelled like rain and forgiveness. Quiet, imperfect, but real. I leaned against the porch railing, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear laughter from a neighbour's porch, faint and familiar. For the first time, it didn't sting. Melissa was gone, but her presence lingered. Not like a wound this time, but like a scar that had finally stopped bleeding. Inside, the foundation plaque caught the last of the sunset, glinting gold against the wall. The words below my name read, "Integrity Rebuilt." I hadn't chosen that line. Naomi had. But standing there, I realised it fit better than anything I could have written myself. The world outside kept moving, as it always does, but the house felt still, not empty, just finally at peace. The morning light stretched over the Blue Ridge Lake like silk, soft and pale against the mist. I carried my coffee mug to the edge of the dock, the wood cool beneath my bare feet. The air smelled faintly of pine and distant rain, and for once, there was no noise, no news alerts, no lawyers, no whispers of scandal, just water and sky. It had been 6 months since everything fell apart and then fell into place again. The Carver Integrity Trust was thriving, small, honest, real. Naomi ran operations from Charleston with the precision of a woman who'd seen too many false smiles. Helen came out of semi-retirement to lead community outreach. I stayed here in Asheville, guiding things from afar. I didn't need the spotlight anymore. Quiet suited me. On the table beside me sat an unopened letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Melissa's. It had arrived 2 weeks ago. I hadn't planned to read it, but today, under this quiet sky, something in me softened. I opened it carefully. "Mom, I'm writing from the community centre in Charleston. Naomi's tougher than you ever were. She doesn't let me hide behind guilt. I've been sorting donations, cleaning storage, talking to women who've lost everything and are trying to start again. One of them said something yesterday that stopped me. She said, 'You can't rebuild until you stop pretending nothing broke.' It reminded me of us. I know I'll never deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday I'll earn your respect again. I miss you." The words blurred slightly. I blinked hard and folded the letter. I didn't cry. I just breathed, the kind of breath that feels like permission. Behind me, a quiet voice said, "You read it." I turned. Naomi was standing at the edge of the path, holding a paper bag and smiling like she'd caught me doing something private but good for me. "She mailed it from the centre last week," she said. "I figured it might take you a while." I smiled faintly. "You figured right." Naomi set the bag down on the dock table and pulled out a small bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "You know, we never did celebrate the reopening properly." "I thought we weren't the celebrating type," I said. "Normally, no," she said, popping the cork, "but I figured after everything we're allowed one toast." The bubbles hissed softly as she poured. She handed me a glass, her eyes glinting. "To survival?" she offered. I shook my head gently. "To living." We clinked glasses. The sound was crisp and clean, like glass breaking in reverse. The champagne was cold and sharp on my tongue. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The lake stretched endlessly before us, calm and shimmering, as if it were listening too. Naomi exhaled, leaning back on the railing. "You ever think about how poetic this all turned out? Betrayed during surgery, they raise a glass over your name, and now here you are, raising one over your peace." I smiled. "Life has a strange sense of humour." "Melissa's trying," she said after a pause. "I see it every day. She's quiet, she works hard. The press still circles her like vultures, but she doesn't hide anymore." "That's good," I said. "She needs to face the truth, not run from it." "She reminds me of you sometimes," Naomi said. The stubbornness, the pride. I laughed softly. That's probably why we collided so hard. Naomi looked at me carefully. Do you think you'll ever let her back in? I stared at the lake for a while before answering. Maybe, but forgiveness isn't a door. It's a hallway. You can walk for miles before you reach the other side. She nodded slowly. Fair enough. A soft breeze rippled across the water, carrying the scent of early spring. I took another sip of champagne. You know, I said, there was a time I thought justice meant punishment. That's how I was raised. Wrong something, pay for it. But now, I think real justice is when you stop letting pain define you. Naomi grinned. That's going on a poster in the office. I rolled my eyes. Don't you dare. We both laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from survival, not comedy. After she left, I sat alone for a while, watching the sky shift from silver to pale gold. I thought of everything that had led here, the betrayal, the courtroom, the silence, the slow rebuilding. It all felt distant now, like another lifetime lived by someone else. I reached into the cabinet beside the dock bench and pulled out an old photo album. The first picture was from decades ago. Me, a younger Melissa, and her father all smiling in front of the foundation building. I traced the edge of her face with my finger. You were always brave, I murmured, just not always kind. The wind carried my words away. I closed the album, set it aside, and picked up my glass again. The bubbles had faded, the drink gone flat. I stood and looked out over the water. They raised their glasses while I was dying, I softly. I'll raise mine. To living. I tipped the glass, letting the last sip fall into the lake. The surface rippled, gold catching in every tiny wave. The sound of the wind through the pines was steady, calm, calm. It wasn't a song of endings, it was one of continuance, of things that endure quietly with grace. Back inside, I washed the glass and set it beside the sink. The house smelled faintly of cedar and coffee, lived in and honest. The plaque from the foundation hung above the mantel now, next to a small frame that held my grandmother's favourite quote, written in her looping script. Kindness isn't surrender. Justice can be quiet. Dignity is the loudest revenge. I ran a hand across the frame and smiled. The clock ticked softly, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the lake reflected the last light of the day. No headlines, no applause, no grand speeches. Just peace. The kind you earn when you stop needing to prove you deserve it. The lake was still when night finally settled, the water mirroring a sky full of quiet stars. I sat there for a while, listening to the wind, realizing that peace doesn't come when everything is perfect. It comes when you stop chasing revenge and start choosing dignity. What happened wasn't about winning or losing, it was about reclaiming what was mine, my voice, my truth, my peace. They raised their glasses while I was dying, but I'm still here, living, breathing, and calm. Maybe that's what real justice looks like. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just sits beside you at sunset, reminding you that you survived without becoming like them. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the weight of family betrayal, the quiet power of taking your life back, or the satisfaction of justice served with grace, then you understand what family revenge stories are really about. Not vengeance, but wisdom. Not hatred, but strength wrapped in calm. And if you believe that the best revenge stories aren't about destruction, but about rebuilding yourself with dignity, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel for more family drama that feels real, stories about survival, justice, and the quiet kind of revenge that only life itself can deliver. Because sometimes the most powerful payback isn't what you do to others, it's how you choose to keep living.